That night, a billionaire made a decision that changed his life forever. Daniel Hart had everything: money, power, respect. But there was one thing that always puzzled him: his maid, Maria. For 12 years, she worked in his mansion silently. Loyal, honest, never asking for anything. But every night at exactly 9:30 p.m., she would leave. No one knew where she went. One night, Daniel decided to follow her. As Maria walked, Daniel noticed something strange. She didn't go to a comfortable home. Instead, she kept walking deeper into poor, broken streets. Finally, she entered a small, damaged house. Curious, Daniel looked inside, and what he saw shocked him. A weak little boy was lying on a broken bed, struggling to breathe. "Ami, you came," the child said with a faint smile. Daniel froze. Maria, his maid, was a mother hiding a painful truth. She sat beside her son, fed him gently, and smiled. But her eyes were full of tears. Then Daniel heard something that broke his heart. "I don't have money left for medicine. What will I do?" Maria whispered while crying alone outside. At that moment, Daniel realized the truth. The woman who served him for years was silently fighting to save her dying son. The next day, Daniel asked her, "Do you need help?" But Maria refused. "I just want to work honestly," she said. That's when Daniel understood her dignity. So without telling her, he arranged everything: the best doctors, the best hospital, no expense spared. Days passed, and slowly the child began to recover. For the first time, Maria had hope. One day the little boy smiled at Daniel and asked, "Are you an angel?" Daniel smiled and said, "No, I just came a little late." Months later, the child was healthy again. Maria stood in tears thanking him, but Daniel had changed too. He realized that true wealth is not money, it's kindness. From that day on, he made a promise. No one who works for me will ever suffer in silence again, because sometimes the people we see every day are hiding the biggest struggles. The night was colder than usual, but what Daniel Hart discovered that night would freeze his heart forever. Daniel Hart wasn't just rich, he was a billionaire. The kind of man whose name opened doors, controlled companies, and changed lives with a single signature. But despite all his success, there was one thing he valued more than money: loyalty. And in his massive mansion, there was one person who had earned that trust more than anyone else: Maria. For over 12 years, Maria had worked in his house as a maid. She was quiet, respectful, and incredibly hardworking. She never complained, never asked for anything, and always stayed invisible, like a shadow moving through the halls. But there was something strange about her. Every night, without fail, she left the mansion at exactly 9:30 p.m. No one knew where she went. Not the guards, not the staff, not even Daniel. At first, he didn't care. Everyone has a personal life, but over time, curiosity turned into suspicion. "Where does she go every night?" Daniel once asked his head of security. "We don't know, sir. She refuses to take the driver. She walks." She walks? That didn't make sense. Maria barely earned enough, yet she refused help and disappeared into the darkness every single night. Something wasn't right. Days passed. Then weeks, and one night, Daniel made a decision that would change everything. "I'm going to follow her." That night, Daniel did something he had never done before. Instead of attending a high-profile business dinner, he stayed back. He turned off his phone, changed into simple clothes, and waited. 29 p.m. From his office window, he watched Maria walk toward the main gate, just like always. Her steps were quick, almost nervous. 7:30 p.m. She stepped out. Daniel followed. At first, it felt ridiculous. A billionaire, secretly following his maid through dark streets. But as they moved further away from the rich neighborhood, the world began to change. The bright lights disappeared. The clean roads turned rough. Luxury turned into poverty. Maria kept walking. Minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Daniel was shocked. "Where is she going?" he whispered to himself. This wasn't just unusual. It was disturbing. Finally, Maria turned into a narrow alley, a place Daniel had never seen before. Broken walls, dim lights, silence. She stopped in front of an old, almost collapsing building. Daniel quickly hid behind a corner. His heart started beating faster. Maria looked around carefully, as if making sure no one was watching. Then she did something unexpected. She took off her clean uniform and revealed old, worn-out clothes underneath. Daniel's eyes widened. What? The woman who worked in his mansion, always neat and tidy, was now dressed like someone living in extreme poverty. Why would she hide this? Maria knocked on the door gently. The door opened, and what Daniel saw next made his entire world shake. Inside the room was a small child, weak, pale, lying on a broken bed, connected to a makeshift oxygen tube, and the moment Maria entered, the child smiled. "Ami, you came." Daniel froze. "Ami? Mother?" His breath stopped. Maria, his maid, was living a secret. Life. She rushed to the child, sat beside him, and gently held his hand. "I'm here, my son. I'm always here." Her voice was filled with love, pain, and exhaustion. Tears rolled down Daniel's eyes without him even realizing. This wasn't what he expected, not even close. But the truth was far deeper and far more heartbreaking than he could ever imagine. Daniel stood frozen outside that broken door, his entire world turning upside down. The woman he thought he knew, the quiet, obedient maid, was living a life of pain he had never imagined. Inside the small room, Maria gently wiped the child's forehead with a damp cloth. "You didn't eat today, did you?" she asked softly. The boy smiled weakly. "I waited for you." Daniel's chest tightened. He stepped closer to the window, careful not to make a sound. The room was barely livable. Cracked walls, a flickering bulb, a rusty fan that barely moved. And, yet, it was filled with love. "Doctor said I'll get better, right?" the boy asked. Maria paused. For a moment, her strong face broke, but she quickly forced a smile. "Yes, you will, my son. You're very brave." Daniel noticed her hands trembling. She was lying. A few minutes later, an elderly woman entered the room. "Maria, the medicine is finished," she said quietly. Maria's face went pale. "I'll arrange it. Don't worry," she replied, though her voice lacked confidence. Daniel's mind raced. Medicine? Treatment? Why hadn't she said anything? Why suffer in silence? As the night deepened, Maria fed her son with her own hands. She barely ate anything herself. Every bite she had, she gave to him. Daniel couldn't take it anymore. This wasn't just loyalty. This was sacrifice. When Maria finally stepped outside the room for a moment, Daniel quickly hid in the shadows. She leaned against the wall and broke down. Silent tears streamed down her face. "I don't have any money left. What will I do?" she whispered to herself. Daniel's heart shattered. A billionaire who spent millions without thinking had someone under his own roof struggling to save her child. And he never knew. That night, Daniel didn't go home immediately. He stayed there, watching from a distance. trying to understand everything, and for the first time in years, he felt helpless. The next morning, everything looked normal. The mansion was as grand as ever. The staff worked as usual, and Maria, she walked in like nothing had happened. Clean uniform, calm face, silent as always. It was as if the woman from last night didn't exist. Daniel called her into his office. "Maria," he said, studying her face carefully. "Is everything okay?" She nodded instantly. "Yes, sir." "Do you need anything? Money? Help? Anything at all?" For a split second, her eyes flickered, but she quickly lowered her gaze. "No, sir. I'm fine." Daniel leaned back in his chair. Fine? How could she say that after what he saw, he decided not to reveal the truth yet? Instead, he wanted to understand her more. So over the next few days, Daniel began observing her closely. Maria worked harder than ever. She never rested. She never complained. But Daniel noticed something else. She was secretly taking leftover food every night, not stealing, just quietly packing small portions, carefully, respectfully, for her son. That night, Daniel followed her again, this time with a purpose. When Maria entered the house, Daniel waited a few minutes, then knocked on the door. Inside, Maria froze. The elderly woman opened the door and gasped. "Sir," Maria rushed out, shocked beyond words. "Sir, what are you doing here?" Her face turned pale. Fear, embarrassment, panic, all at once. Daniel looked at her, not as a maid, but as a mother. "I know everything, Maria." Silence filled the air. Her eyes slowly filled with tears. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't want you to see this," she whispered. "Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel asked gently. Maria shook her head. "I didn't want charity. I just wanted to work, honestly." Daniel stepped inside. He looked at the child, fragile and weak, yet smiling. "What's his name?" Daniel asked. "Ayan," Maria replied softly. Daniel walked closer. Ayan looked at him curiously. "Are you my mother's boss?" he asked. Daniel smiled faintly. "Yes, I am." That moment changed something inside Daniel. Not business, not power, but humanity. The next morning, Daniel made a call, not to his business partners, not to investors, but to the best doctors in the city. "I want the best treatment arranged immediately," he said firmly, "no matter the cost." Within hours, everything changed. Ayan was moved to a top hospital. Specialists were assigned, advanced equipment was arranged. Maria couldn't believe it. "Sir, this is too much. I can't repay you," she cried. Daniel shook his head. "You already have, with your loyalty." Days turned into weeks. Treatment continued, slowly. Ayan started improving. His color returned. His smile grew stronger. And for the first time, Maria had hope. One evening, Ayan held Daniel's hand. "Are you an angel?" he asked innocently. Daniel laughed softly. "No, I just came a little late." But deep inside, he knew the truth. He had been blind, too busy with wealth, to see real struggle right beside him. Months later, the mansion felt different, warmer, more human. Ayan was finally healthy, running, laughing, living. Maria stood beside him, tears of happiness in her eyes. "Thank you, sir. You gave my son a second life," she said. Daniel looked at them and smiled. "No, Maria, you reminded me what life really is." But he didn't stop there. Daniel created a foundation to help workers, staff, and people like Maria who suffer silently. He made a rule: no one who works for me will ever struggle alone again. Maria was no longer just a maid. She became family, and Ayan, he became the light of the house, and sometimes, late at night, Daniel would sit quietly and think, what if he never followed her that night? What if he ignored his curiosity? He would have remained rich, but empty. Because that night, a billionaire didn't just discover a secret. He discovered a heart. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories.